Yeah, you're my therapist, Pete. Get out.
We're too high.
On any one day, there's anything between 40 and 80,000 of these.
Dingo definitely took Azaria.
It was back in 1979 that...
Yana appeared to be fresh and too beautiful.
And we were a bit puffed up.
And we had our doubts.
Oh, I thought they were really nice fellows.
Line, and 2 more lines of smaller...
You'd be amazed to know how tiny they really are.
May I ask?
You can.
Mike Munro was cheeky personified.
Jennifer Burns, fantastic.
But don't you ever listen to the people who criticise
Yes, I do.
I grew up as a teenager watching her on 60 Minutes.
You feel old?
She's got on 50-something, that's all? That is not old.
You believe there was a conspiracy?
Dodie and Diana being murdered, definitely.
I'm Elizabeth Hayes. You realise you're wanted in Australia?
Once I knew Dolly Dunn was in that room, I truly thought I might have a little heart attack.
We try to take the audience as close to the action as possible.
Oh, God.
Sometimes too close.
Brings out a big gun.
Like this.
So we go, poof.
I just said, why did you do that? He said, you asked me the question.
There are plantations all the way up this valley.
Volcano.
We all have that inner strength inside of us, but we just never get tested.
Good evening and welcome to 60 Minutes. I'm Liz Hayes. In the hugely competitive and highly fickle business of Australian commercial television, longevity is not a word you hear very often. But our program, 60 Minutes, has defied the odds. Tonight we celebrate 40 years as the most watched current affairs program in the country. But where to begin? Well, way back in the late 1970s, Malcolm Fraser was our leader. Petrol was 26 cents a litre. A catchy cricket jingle, "Come on Aussie, come on," was the #1 song on the radio. And 3 little-known journalists with too much hair were handed an assignment like no other. Go anywhere in the world you like, spend as much money as you need, and report any story you want on one condition. Don't let it be boring. But even before Ray Martin, George Negus and Ian Leslie did the unthinkable for journalists by becoming household names, it was 2 other men who first pressed go on the 60 Minutes stopwatch. A cantankerous, no-nonsense network proprietor called Kerry Packer, and an equally strong-willed TV producer, Gerald Stone.
I think one of the tests of a truly great television program is to try to think what life might have been like without it.
As I remember, July 1978, that Kerry Packer came to me and he said that you're going to take over this program that we're going to bring in called 60 Minutes. He only gave me a few words of advice. He said, I don't give a what it takes, but just do it and get it right.
Please explain. What can I say? Tough titties.
But goodness gracious me.
Australian 60 Minutes.
These kids, way out here in the middle of nowhere, are training to be guerrilla fighters to take on the Moroccans.
First of all, I knew that I needed 3 front men.
He said, do you like travel? I said, who doesn't?
When Gerald Stone rang me about 60 Minutes, I was ready.
Here at the busy Coroner's Court in Sydney.
Of just finding a story anywhere in the world. I used to dream of working on something like that, and I suddenly had the chance.
It was like winning the lottery, best call I've ever had in my life. I had never met Ray Martin or George Negus before. They hadn't met me. All 3 of us were relatively unknown.
I knew George Negus. I didn't know Ian Leslie. I didn't know who he was.
The moment we met, I'm not saying we fell in love with each other, but it was like there was a bond. It was an instant bond.
We were different, and I think that was a part of Gerald Stone's genius. We were so different.
I went out of my way to find reporters that weren't larger than life.
They've been using the paths in these mountains.
Because I wanted it to be a fresh group of people. Ray Martin was a reporter well known in the ABC, but not very much outside. George had hardly any recognition. Ian was a good, solid, dogged reporter, but not that well known.
Is that the Mujahideen will never accept defeat. I'm Ian Leslie.
I'm George Negus.
I'm Ray Martin. Those stories and more tonight on 60 Minutes.
Yes, I did have the first story ever broadcast on 60 Minutes. It was not one of my most memorable stories.
We call it buttlegging. Basically, buttlegging is the smuggling of cigarettes across state borders.
About the smuggling trade from Queensland to New South Wales of cigarettes. But we had to start somewhere.
I remember my first story, which was about Big Brother television. And
just imagine if instead of sitting in that chair and listening to me, you could actually tell the TV set what you think and have someone take notice.
Seemed to be Star Wars or science fiction at the time.
At home, the TV screen tells you how and when to vote. It's dead easy.
A few years ago, the trend was to try talking it all out on a psychiatrist's couch. But these days, the emphasis seems to be on action speaking louder than words.
Lies, 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 lies. Every word of lies are lies.
I'm not sure that we knew what we were doing when we first started.
Everybody's a little bit crazy, and some people are better hiding it than others.
I would regard it as not the finest moment in my television life.
We thought the program was pretty good. The ratings of the audience said...
it's nice to be able to sit here now and say, I was the executive producer of that wonderful program, 60 Minutes, but on that first night, I was almost not a producer at all.
The reaction after our very first broadcast in February 1979 was a disaster.
Kerry called me up after the show and said that was terrible, and I wanted fixed, and I was stunned. I remember walking up to the administration building and people were turning their back on me. I was a non-person.
Our enemies were everywhere. They were ready to shoot us down.
We were targets for newspaper guys who were earning less money and getting less glory and less glamour than we were getting on 60 Minutes.
They all laughed and said, this was the biggest flop.
So we were an easy target.
But within 3 months, we hit our straps and no one could stop us.
Afghanistan was the first country in the world to recognise the Soviet regime.
The Israelis won't admit that they've got the bomb.
Did you kill Miranda Downs? No. If he was faking, he's a very good actor.
I knew that I had the goods there. I had the reporters, I had the team, I had everything going for me except Kerry Packer.
I think George Negus was probably the critical person in the team early on.
Terrorists have been able to kill, bomb and kidnap in Spain.
People stop us in the street almost and tell us that Margaret Thatcher is plain pig-headed.
George got lampooned for being rude to Maggie Thatcher.
Why won't you tell me their names and who they are?
Attitude, lots of attitude. And that's what I wanted.
I thought we weren't going to get out of number 10 Downing Street alive, to be honest. Gerald Stone rang me and said, how did the interview go? I said, it's a political interview, I would give it 6 out of 10. And he said, and as an interview generally? I said, 11 out of 10. Don't worry, they'll watch. That's what I like about you.
I think it became a rating success because it was different.
By daylight, Dracula's castle is intriguing.
And there was almost a no-dickhead policy from Gerald Stone. You could trust the people you were with, and I think the cameramen and the soundmen and the producers were the best in the business, not just here, but around the world.
Once Kerry came to understand that this was a good program, he used to call me up every Sunday night to complain about something, right? Usually about George Negus. He thought George Negus was too opinionated.
You realise that the whole idea of human rights in El Salvador today is a joke.
Kerry was a businessman. But the ratings went up. He didn't think I was a dangerous left-winger any longer. He did once, and I told him he was a dangerous right-winger, so we're even.
And there was one night when I had a few too many drinks, and Kerry had a few too many opinions.
I think there is a suggestion out there that I'm slightly eccentric.
But all of a sudden, I really lost it. And I said, look, Kerry, I've got 3 million viewers, and you're only one of them. And there was this long pause, and then he came back and said, I would have thought I'd at least count for 2.
What did I say?
I I'd go to dinner parties and they'd say, George, I better tell you at the start, I don't watch commercial television. And then they'd tell me what was wrong with the last 6 stories I did.
Refugee camp in the world.
So at one point I felt like saying there are only 2 kinds of Australians. Australians who watch 60 Minutes and people who lie and say they don't.
Just shut up and listen for a minute, you might learn something.
Nothing could stop us. We were the kings of the road.
60 Minutes took you on this magic carpet ride and you went to exotic places and...
It got an enormous amount of attention because people had never seen reporters sort of pushing microphones up people's noses in those days. Normally you were polite.
No, we want our car back.
And you asked respectful questions, but we just crashed in on this. And that's the style, that's what Gerald wanted.
And that's what we did. Now, we could do it because we were the only ones in the game.
Here you cannot take photos.
Why not? Why can't we take photos?
The worst mistake you could make on 60 Minutes was to be boring. You could not afford to lose your audience.
Bearing in mind your professional estimate of the range and the cumulative effect of the drugs, what would you say about a prescription of this size?
It's dangerous and potentially fatal.
We didn't bury people in facts and figures and so on.
We discovered that at least 7 people died in a short period of time.
Sometimes it was funny, sometimes it was serious. Sometimes it was in Australia, sometimes it was some woebegone place I'd never been to before. I did one story, I remember, and Gerald said, what's it called? I said, if the world had ends, this place will be one of them. He didn't ask me where it was. He said, go and do it.
The storytelling was meant to appeal and meant to be watchable.
Rajneeshis are taught not to be like Queen of England, who's afraid to show her tits.
Gerald Stone didn't hire us to be invisible. Gerald Stone insisted that we inject our personalities into our stories. We were the storytellers.
This really is the delightful fascination that these islands of the Galapagos hold for the layman, if you like, for the amateur Charles Darwins of this world.
We got into trouble for, if you like, putting ourselves too much in our stories. So what? And I ignored that.
Of course, there's the all-important passport.
I said, there's nothing wrong with us becoming involved. People are not stupid. If they don't like what we're doing and saying, they can turn the knob off.
Apparently the CIA got up to some pretty weird tricks, including an exploding seashell which was supposed to blow up when Fidel Castro went skin diving.
You had to ask interesting questions.
You consume your own urine in the morning. This is hard for us to understand.
I had constipation for 35 years, and that was cured by this therapy.
Each of our stories had an element you could hardly see anywhere else, whether it was a surprise or beauty. If somebody walks off in an interview in disgust.
Turn that thing off.
You've been accused of man-bashing.
Yeah, and it's going to happen right here.
That was a thing to watch on a 60 Minutes.
We travel anywhere in the world to get our stories. So there was pressure to make sure that you succeeded.
This little pup's just about 5 days old, and he's terrified.
If you went somewhere and a story failed, you'd feel like you're a loser. I mean, you'd really, and everyone in the place would know that you and the team had been somewhere and you hadn't come back with the story.
You couldn't bring back a dud. That was a fatal error, and you'd be told very quickly, hey, you've got to sharpen up your style, you've got to improve your questions. When are you going to start learning to ask 60 Minutes type questions? So there was quite a difference in there, and Gerald was a hard taskmaster.
If you couldn't make a story watchable, then you weren't doing your job as a 60 Minutes reporter.
Coming up.
So I had no idea who this person was.
I wouldn't call it jealousy, but
Jana appeared to be fresh and too beautiful.
Time to break up the boys' club.
That was interesting.
Jana Wendt joins 60 Minutes.
They then began to demonstrate their displeasure or dismay or alarm, I don't know.
We were quite arrogant about Jana joining.
And Australian television changes forever.
I do remember him saying to me, please tell me you're going to be 25 before we launch you on the show.
Now get lost, Jana. Jana Wendt.
That's next on 60 Minutes.
Gerald said, it doesn't matter where the story is, if it's a good story, you can go out and do it. There were no restraints where you could go.
What I'm
I'm doing is pointless, possibly even wrong. Rest your conscience. And some of these will be happy for a while at least. These are the children of India. You thank God that they aren't yours.
In those days, we were, the three musketeers, if you like. We could go anywhere we liked, and it appeared that we were doing brave and incredible things. We weren't, but we were having a lot of fun.
Graham Webb and his research team, Rick and George, spend most of their time wading through this pea soup-coloured swamp water, infested with leeches and snakes.
Often, it was just a piece of camera work that made a story so watchable.
Cerro Pelada is pretty much a law unto itself.
George covered a story in South America where there was a gold mine, a huge ditch in the ground, thousands of poor peons going up with mud and everything else. And the people are just so shocked. It was a beautiful vision.
It was exciting. The excitement level just overrode all the pressures. And it was wonderful getting back, but I have to say that the second you landed back in Australia, there was a certain element of boredom that would creep in, and you'd wonder, when's my next assignment? I want to go to South America, or I want to go to the ice flows of Newfoundland, or back to Afghanistan.
This is the village of Angkor Hadar on the Pakistan-Afghanistan border.
I mean, the three of us running around the world and putting 3 stories to air every week was a miracle.
I was away from home 9 to 10 months of the year.
And the reporters were just working too hard. Yeah, they couldn't handle the thing.
I was so impressed with those guys who were going out there and doing all that important stuff in the world.
And I thought it was time to add another reporter. Somebody said, well, if you're interested in a woman reporter, we know a woman down in Melbourne, Jana Vent, who is a newsreader at the time, but she has got great potential.
A girl joining the show, really a girl, a young person, an inexperienced young person, probably a bolshy young person who thought that she was capable of doing much more than she was capable of doing at that time.
We learned from Gerald that she had worked on Channel 10 News in Melbourne.
That was interesting.
So I had no idea who this person was.
I wouldn't call it jealousy, but
Jana appeared to be fresh and too beautiful.
It was pre-Me Too.
We believed we had we'd paid our dues, Ian and George and I.
And we were a bit puffed up.
And we had our doubts.
Oh, I thought they were really nice fellows. I thought this was a wonderful unit to be joining.
I got a call from Jana one night saying, Leslie, we should have dinner. I said, no, I'm too busy. We were quite arrogant about Jana joining.
And they then began to demonstrate their displeasure or dismay or alarm, I don't know.
My first encounter with her, I had a lunch with her, and we drank far too much, and I think she drank better than me.
We all liked a healthy drink, in the old days. Never drink to excess, of course, but, just occasionally when there are sort of existential issues like this being discussed, should the new reporter be there or not? Yeah, I didn't hold back on that score either.
But as these things do, the problem worked itself out.
What makes Haiti different is voodoo.
She's all right. She's all right.
She was immediately not just beautiful, but immediately tough.
Yeah, it was a serious addition to the team. There's no doubt about that.
She really did cut it. She was a fantastic reporter, and the family grew a little bit bigger.
She had all the makings of a 60 Minutes person. And so I think it was in that 4th year, was it, that Jana came to be.
What Gerald saw, I really don't know. I know that he was deeply concerned about how young I was. And I do remember him saying to me, please tell me you're going to be 25 before we launch you on the show.
I'm Jana Vent.
I'm George Negus.
I'm Ray Martin. And I'm Ian Leslie. Those stories and more tonight on 60 Minutes.
The fact is that modern science is starting to pay more and more attention to some of the unexplained events found in black magic and voodoo.
Yes, voodoo in Haiti was an interesting first story to do.
What sort of contact have you personally had with zombies?
In Haiti, who has not had contact with zombies?
It had obviously, a lot of drama about it. Dead people walking again is a fairly good basis for a story. Lots of colour and motion, lots of chooks with their heads being ripped off.
Narcisse remembers the coffin nail hitting his face and causing this scar.
I enjoyed it. The blowback came afterwards. It's a hot place, Haiti, and so the girl reporter, changes clothes as the weather would dictate. Apparently then it was just too much for the audience that this person who appeared every day in a different setting would change clothes.
And the person certified dead less than 12 hours before simply steps out of his grave and is led away to join the ranks of the living dead.
Today no one would blink.
I'm so glad she did join us because, first of all, it became a kind of a signal to young women all over Australia that you can succeed as well as anybody else. So she was a very important element in that program.
One of the ladies who left your tour because it was so successful. Are you prepared to answer the questions that Consumer Affairs have to ask you about?
In fact, she turned out to be the perfume steamroller.
Now get lost, Jana Bent.
Yes, the perfume steamroller was a moniker that I was given.
Do you think it's reasonable to provide them with information about where they're going, Mr. Tiernan?
I remember sitting in a sort of a bar restaurant getting a meal, and I remember that I ordered what I thought was a fairly bolshy thing to order for the new girl on the block, which was, I think, bull's testicles. And that was quite unusual. I think I ate it, and I think that might have somehow won me the name.
You drained the Philippines of money to enrich yourself.
That's a lie.
Things just settled down, and people obviously got used to having me around and got used to having me as a member of the lineup. And then it was very comfortable.
Coming up, more familiar faces.
Jeff McMullen in a loincloth was quite a sight.
Mike Munro was a classic, wasn't he? I mean, he was cheeky personified.
What a kisser.
No topic off limits.
When he asked Dolly Parton the size of her breasts, I think only he could have gotten away with that at the time.
Up yours, Lester.
And the stories that made history.
Tracy Curo.
Are you xenophobic? Please explain.
That's next on 60 Minutes.
So determined was Murdoch to beat the unions that
it's hard to find a single building that hasn't been blown to bits in the last Libyan battle.
Diana was the coming of the Queen, wasn't she, really? I mean, it was like the next coronation on Australian TV. I mean, she was classy, she was intelligent, she was articulate.
Streets of Gaza used to belong to the PLO. It was the revolutionary face of the Palestinians.
I mean, she was everything a 60 Minutes reporter, dare I say it, should be. They were like sort of TV royalty, in a sense. I mean, they were the king of the heap.
Using sophisticated receivers and listening through earphones.
Those guys were running around, it was a bit like sort of Wild West action heroes.
Of course, what Ray, Ian, George and Diana started went on to become one of the most popular and successful television programs in Australia.
I'm speechless.
Australia, what next?
It smells strongly of caribou. When you look back to the stories, you're looking at a template, really. We all tell stories in our own way, but we have guiding principles, and I guess they set them in those early days.
And the reporters who came along after that were incredibly memorable in their own right too. I mean, there was a cavalcade of very, very competent, entertaining, great people. Jeff McMullen comes to mind, Mike Munro, Jennifer Byrne, Tracy Curo,
Do you feel old?
Just because I'm 50-something, that's old? That is not old.
Ellen Fanning. I remember Jeff McMullen just on the road all the time, and mostly in hot, sort of dusty locations.
He explained how the potoro was inserted through a child's lip.
Jeff McMullen in a loincloth was quite a sight, actually, I think. There was a man who could afford to be in a loincloth, really.
It's only when you see a ship like this out of the water that you realise just how big it really is.
Amazing. Intrepid reporter, actually.
How much do you remember from 20 years ago?
I know the words of most of your songs.
Jennifer Byrne's fantastic. You know, I grew up as a teenager watching her on 60 Minutes. She's smart, she's so well read, and she's funny.
Me to tell you that while some people think you're very lovable,
Sure.
others can't stand you.
This is
Hate
sure.
you.
Well,
Why do you divide people so much?
Mike Munro was a classic, wasn't he? I mean, he was cheeky personified.
What, I kiss her?
When he asked Dolly Parton the size of her breasts, I think only he could have gotten away with it at the time.
You'd be amazed to know how tiny they really are.
May I ask?
You can't up yours, Buster.
And I'm not even sure he could get away with it today.
Talk about memorable questions. Tracy Curo.
Are you xenophobic? Please explain.
For better or worse, her whole career will be defined by a question that she asked a politician whose whole political career has been defined by the same question.
No, I don't think I am. No, I'm not.
What I always remember about Ellen Fanning is her interviews. She was a fantastic interviewer.
You believe there was a conspiracy to kill Dodie?
They been murdered. Dodie and Diana been murdered, definitely. I am the father who knows everything.
Who would want them dead?
I think of all the amazing people who've gone through, worked on this program over the years, and you kind of then just go, wow, can't believe I'm here. Why'd they let me in?
We do try to stick to those old principles of telling great stories and taking an audience as close to the action as possible.
Got the eyes.
Oh, God. Sometimes too close.
Well, presentations like this, all the way.
I understand that there is key evidence, yes or no.
That's enough. That's enough.
Do you feel like you are now enjoying life? Yes.
Yeah.
Coming up, charging to the front line.
Getting our way and we've been told to go and take cover.
How would you execute that man?
And the fellow brings out a big gun.
Whiskey demand like this.
We go, whoop.
But why?
For a lot of observers, it might be weird what we like to do, and that is run towards the action.
Plus, even more danger.
Yeah, forget the war zones.
Celebrities.
I don't know.
Russell Brand is naughty. He's just a naughty boy.
Was Nicole the love of your life?
What kind of interview do you do here? You call me a bastard, that's your first question.
That's next on 60 Minutes.
I don't know that anybody ever told me I had to go to a war zone. I was hired on a false premise.
If you've got a camera which looks like a bazooka, and you've got a microphone that looks like a rifle of some kind, and you're in a war zone, as we were, that's pretty dangerous.
I guess it sounds a bit pretentious, but I would describe myself as an anti-war correspondent. All that war proves is that the human race is unintelligent.
Needless to say, we didn't get much sleep.
For the last 6 years, these Pakistani troops have been fighting the highest war on earth.
The area we are now in is the most dangerous for coalition forces. And we've been told to go and take cover.
The gun in my head story has probably been replayed on 60 Minutes more than any other scene.
And sometimes you yourself would be the executioner?
Yes.
How would you execute that man?
And the fellow brings out a big gun.
Whiskey demand like this.
we go, whoop.
It was a moment of white light that went through your head. I just said, why did you do that? He said, you asked me the question. I thought you wanted to know the answer.
Just cut there, mate.
I should have kept the cameras running. I turned to the camera, I said, cut, mate. I just couldn't think of another question.
I do remember my first story for 60, yes, unfortunately. In fact, I don't think I'll ever forget it. The Hezbollah war from both sides. That was my first war zone, yeah. I wish I had a packed my brown corduroy trousers.
I can't tell you exactly where we are because the Israeli Defence Force don't want to give away the position so close to the border of Lebanon.
We ended up coming under fire in Israel by a Katyusha rocket from the Hezbollah, from the Lebanon side. And then when we got to Beirut, we got bombed by the Israelis.
They're saying 2 streets away. It certainly sounds like it's a lot closer than that.
One thing I remember more than anything about that was the promo that ran back here in Australia because voiceover guy said, "Welcome to 60 Minutes, mate." And the bombs were going off and I thought, yeah, that's pretty much it. Welcome to the crease.
There's nothing good about going into dangerous situations except that you know you're going there for a purpose.
There was no HR. The number of times you'd be somewhere in a war zone saying, if there was a human resources person here, they wouldn't let you do it.
I worry about danger, crowds turning on you. I worry about, taking on a mob. A mob turning is really frightening, and that has happened. You don't need to hurt us. There's no need to be unkind. One of the things about 60 Minutes is that we're all equal. Even our Tassie tiger, Charlie, even he's been to a war zone.
Of course, I'm a devout coward, which is why I'm still here.
I'm walking with one of the bravest men in the world.
But sometimes I don't volunteer. I just go because I'm told.
With a strong commitment.
Still, there's nothing more exciting than leaving a shithole. Getting out of Afghanistan year before last. The relief and the great pleasure that you survived it when there were so many people around you could see actually wanted to kill you. There's nothing journalistic about that. It's just, human.
I'm not sure which comes first for a 60 Minutes reporter stroke producer, whether it's the life or the story.
Colonel, you've been described as many things. A terrorist, as a butcher, I think, as a gangster, and as a madman. Why are you described in all those ways?
Gaddafi was a very early interview, and yes, that was a steep learning experience because he didn't present as a level-headed person. He presented as an eccentric person, and some would have said at times, slightly crazy person.
Yet in all your attempts to achieve Arab unity, you failed.
I failed.
So there are situations you never expect to be in. That does happen on 60 Minutes. You do think, well, what are my family doing now? Are they cooking dinner while I'm here next to the armed guards? What's happening back home, It happens.
For a lot of observers, it might be weird what we like to do, and that is run towards the action. Sometimes you have this voice in your head, why are you doing this? They're all worried about this one guy. I'm personally worried about the others they can't see.
The fighting has been frequent and it's really only just ended. We've got to get going, actually.
But you wouldn't be human if, you didn't have sweaty palms sometimes, if your heart wasn't in your throat, and if the really sensible part of you was saying, this is not a good idea.
But forget the war zones, it's the celebrities you want to be careful of. Don't get too close to them.
I think everybody knows at 60 Minutes that I absolutely abhor doing stories on celebrities. And one of the reasons for that is very often celebrities aren't interested in being interviewed.
When I asked him, the times there are changing, Bob, what do you think? And he said,
I don't know. I have no idea.
I don't know, man. I probably knew at the time.
It's more like extracting a tooth than a normal conversation.
Yikes. I came away jokingly saying, I don't know what he was on, but I'm glad I wasn't.
And let's face it, just because some of these people are celebrities doesn't make them a nice person.
Am I a nice boy? I suppose that's subject to interpretation.
I mean, some of them have, you know, the personality of a pet rock.
Yeah, because we're getting on so well. And,
Yeah, we're getting along so well.
Ashton Kutcher's cute, but is he more big head than big kid?
Hey, Tom. Peter, how you been? Nice to see you. Good to see you.
And you've got to try and get something out of them. That's mission impossible sometimes.
Was Nicole the love of your life?
What do you mean, Peter?
When anything in television goes wrong, I watch it like this. I go, oh no, that could be me. That could have happened to me.
Listen, here's the thing, Peter. Yeah. You're stepping over a line now. You're stepping over a line. You know you are.
Well, I suppose they're questions
Peter,
that people want to know.
Peter, you want to know. So, I'm just telling you right now, okay? Just put your manners back in.
And Mr. Cruz is a very touchy man. Dare I say it, with a lot to be touchy about.
Then sometimes you meet one of these stars who is a seriously nice person and would be, you know, a fantastic guy or girl to have a beer with if they weren't a star.
I mean, I'm an emotional wreck. Anything moves me, so...
You're a quieter man. You don't drink on the road. Booze, all that chaos,
Booze,
drugs
girls,
behind
drugs,
you.
all out of the window.
My memory of Mick Jagger is that he was just fun. I thought he was fun. I do believe he called me Miss Bossy Boots, and I don't know why.
When will you personally get to a point,
Yes, Bossy Boots.
From there, I met Beyonce.
Who?
Am I supposed to stop talking now?
Yeah.
When they're on board, it's a revelation. It's like, yes! George Clooney is one of the most professional celebrities going. I mean, he is a standout. This is a man who turns up with knowledge of what's required, what you want.
Life's too short not to laugh a lot, and you make me laugh, so thank you.
Well, thank you.
There you go.
That's a nice thing to say.
Yeah, it's true. A joy to behold, and not bad in the eye. I don't think you can say that anymore.
I don't know. It's like coconut stuff, thanks to coconut.
It works a treat. Russell Brand is naughty. He's just a naughty boy.
Are you known for being a kinky woman in Australia?
No, not for my kinkiness, no. I've never had someone try to undo my bra before.
Russell. All right, take care. Russell, I can undo your bra just like this. Liz, I love you.
You know, what kind of interview is that?
I had to do a story on Sophia Loren, who had been a bit of a childhood infatuation for me. And I flew across to LA, and my producer said, here, read this on the way. And it was a book called My Life by Sophia Loren. So I read it, and it started off saying it was not easy to be born illegitimate in Italy and in Naples in pre-war Italy. So it was my first question.
Does it surprise you that you have become who you are and got to where you are?
Why should it surprise me?
Well, because the odds seem so great. I mean, being illegitimate and growing up in the slums.
I was never illegitimate myself.
What kind of interview do you do here? You call me a bastard, that's your first question. Who is this man? And I said, oh, look, Sophia, sorry, it's in your book. I've read your book. And she said, My Life by Sophia Loren. She'd never seen the bloody book. And she read, it was not easy to be born illegitimate, blah, 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 blah. And she said, all right, I say it once, I write it once, I say it once, I don't want to talk about it again.
Give me a wild animal any day rather than a star in Hollywood. Can you tell the boss?
Coming up, remembering our friend.
He said, perhaps, Miss McLean, I should ask you, is there anything that you don't believe in? What a great question.
The fearless.
You know that I was receiving your shells last night?
And sometimes feared, Richard Carlton.
Tell the truth. Isn't life easier being on the dole?
That's next on 60 Minutes.
What other job in the world lets you tick off bucket list items? I mean, we're so lucky.
Oh, Marjorie. That's one Marjorie, and this one over here is Joe. Just call her in. Marjorie!
Marjorie!
One blow of its flipper could just smash this boat to smithereens. Just blindly. Right there. On our safari, 60 Minutes was lucky. Not one rhino, but two. A mother and a baby.
Henry, not to touch.
Okay. She's not going to mind? No, she's not minding, not at this stage anyway. Oh, well, perhaps she does mind.
That's incredible. I ran with the bulls in Spain. Probably wouldn't do that one again. Swimming with leopard seals in Antarctica. Don't recommend that. The water was so cold, so cold. And, you know, swimming with great white sharks. I've been up close with lions.
I've gone over old stories and looked at them and thought, yeah, I really shouldn't try that at home. Story we did in the wilderness of Alaska with a guy who decided, lovely bloke, but champion nutcase, decided that he'd build a house in the middle of nowhere and try and make friends with the Alaskan black bears and the grizzlies who were walking through his property.
I imagine there's people all over with betting pools on how long I'm going to survive, which is fine.
Charlie Vandergore, his name was. I said, Charlie, you know, mate, we have no gun. I was thinking machine gun, possibly a bazooka. And he said no. He said, oh, no, you know, don't worry about that. You know, these things are like a chainsaw when they get going. You know, if you got a gun, it doesn't matter. They'll kill you. I said, that's making me feel much better. Thanks, Charlie. The jaws on these things are unbelievable. And they're sort of, you know, fangs, if I can use that word.
You know, Liam always talks about the time he did a story with black bears. I mean, black bears, they're not even real bears, are they?
Some people say, oh, it's only a big dog.
They came up to his knees.
Look at her. Does she look like an angry animal?
I tell you, it's not a big dog, mate. It's a big bear.
I did the real bear story. Grizzly bears. Now, when those things stand up, he's a really big animal. That's a bear.
For centuries, European brown bears have been playthings for humans. So there we were, a few hours later, travelling in a convoy across Turkey with gypsies as escorts and a 100-kilo brown bear for company.
Richard Carlton, of course, was a man who loved danger.
Do you know that I was receiving your shells last night?
He intrigued people by his arrogance and willingness to do things that other people didn't do.
Welcome to Afghanistan. The conditions here are appalling.
The questions he asked were impossible to duplicate.
Not very plausible, though, is it?
Richard could say extraordinary things that I wouldn't say to you. I wouldn't say to another human being. But Richard just didn't know that this was going to be wounding.
Listen, you did that to me, I'd give you a smack in the face.
That'll be the last smack you give me.
It doesn't bother you that you're laughed at or ridiculed?
No, why should it, you know?
That kind of stuff was amazing. Richard took a ne'er-do-well who's been on the dole for a couple of years. That's how Richard saw it.
You're not really much of a human being, are you?
Me?
Yes.
And he said, well, you're not much of a human being, are you? Not much of a specimen of humanity.
Convince me that you're not a dole bludger.
Well, I get up in the morning, I get on the bus, I go and I look for work.
Tell the truth. Isn't life easier being on the dole?
Richard said later, you know, when I looked back at that, I thought, well, here's this big man beating up on this pathetic little person. It wasn't very good.
I don't know what a pork pie is.
I'll tell you what it is, a lie.
No,
you know, when I look back, I'm not very pleased with myself. But Richard's best question ever, he's talking to the completely mad Shirley MacLaine.
And then you felt that you were able to talk to the elephant because you'd met the elephant in a previous life.
You find that difficult to understand?
I find it impossible.
He said, perhaps, Miss MacLaine, I should ask you,
is there anything that you don't believe in?
What a great question.
If that was Richard's best question, his close second would most likely be his very last question. He was at Beaconsfield covering the trapped miners, and he asked one very significant question. And in doing that, he gave all the other journalists there really a masterclass.
Why is it that you continue to send men into work in such dangerous environment?
He said, was it greed or love of gold, as I remember?
He didn't get an answer to it. He didn't even wait for an answer. I don't think he was expecting to get one. He turned away. He looked at the camera. He walked away and then he collapsed.
I'll tell you a story that you probably can't use, but when John Westacott, the EP, heard from a tearful producer that Richard had died, do you know what Westy's first question was? It was, has he done the voiceover.
On Anzac Day, the earth beneath Beaconsfield rumbled, but not for the first time.
And fortuitously he had. And that sounds horrendously callous, but after that, of course, West got dissolved into tears, as we all did.
This is about as far off the beaten track as you can get.
I want you to look at the center of that clock right there, okay? If you concentrate on the clock.
We were always going to miss Richard Carlton. He was a unique journalist and a unique personality.
Ah, love him, miss him every day. And so does the show.
Professionally, Richard set the benchmark in storytelling and in some of his interviews. He did extraordinary interviews.
They seem to be saying, you stop the bombing, the suicide bombers particularly, and they'll stop bombing you.
Who had started?
So the greater man will be the one who stops, not the one who starts it.
It's a different age now. I don't think there is even room for another Richard Carlton now. The world has become too contracted, too mean-spirited in a way. There's no more time for discourse. People only want what is acceptable, and the politically unacceptable, the politically incorrect. It's a curse on journalism. Richard got out just in time, I think.
Coming up, when interviews go wrong.
When someone walks out, I feel like I failed. When someone walks out, I don't think that means I've done a great job.
I'm going to take 5 minutes.
Sorry?
I don't like your terminology. I don't like how you're asking me the question.
An Australian 60 Minutes crew has been arrested.
Well, I still haven't seen those front pages.
What really happened in Beirut?
The last thing you want to be is the story.
That's next on 60 Minutes.
The Iranian enemy is just about within yelling distance across these marshes, and they outnumber these Iraqis.
When people say to me, when I meet you, you're just like you are on television. I said, no, you got it wrong. On television, I'm just like I am. If you think you know me, you do. Which means sometimes you'll tell me how wonderful what I've done is, and sometimes you'll feel like chucking rocks at the set.
You have to be realistic about this. You invite yourself into people's living rooms on a Sunday night. You should expect some scrutiny, both scrutiny of your professional output, and I guess along with it comes some personal scrutiny. That's just the way television works.
The good thing about being recognised was not the fact that they knew George or me or Ray. They knew about the program. They'd listened to your story, and that was a sheer joy.
It's difficult to know whether I'm talking to an estranged wife of the Canadian Prime Minister or just a publicity-seeking, very beautiful young woman.
Ernie, people could think that you just came up with a plan, a scheme.
Well, to start with, anybody believes that's a bloody idiot. Once
I knew Dolly Dunn was in that room, I truly thought I might have a little heart attack.
I'm Elizabeth Hayes. You realise you're wanted in Australia?
It's one of the things about walking in on people. Anything can happen. And I was a little nervy about that. Mr. Dunn, do you not have any conscience?
Did you ask James Ashby to procure copies of Peter Slipper's diary for you?
Yes, I did.
Is the truth of it that you didn't want a baby with Down syndrome?
Obviously, a lot of people have had a lot of digs at me while I've been in prison because I can't defend myself. But...
Well, this is your chance. I love asking difficult questions. I mean, that's what the program demands, because I think people at home want to ask those sort of questions. You just told me that you were a kind and caring guy.
Yeah, absolutely. And
you couldn't even be bothered to go out on the balcony and look over the side and see what had happened to her.
Well, whatever had happened out there had happened, and...
You understand why many people would think you're a cold, heartless, cruel bastard? I'm happy to ask somebody, if they've killed somebody or if they've cooked the books.
Isn't that just basic fraud? Yes.
Belle, please. Do you accept the level of damage you've done to people's trust?
You're a very nice woman, but you're starting to get to the point. It's obviously just a hatchet shop here, so I'm kind of pretty much ready to move on.
There's nothing hatchet about it. I'm pretty straight. I don't try to ambush. I just ask the question.
Next question.
I think the peanut gallery is going to start chiming in really quickly.
But those people who don't want to answer the question often feel ambushed or feel aggrieved or somehow or other you should never have asked that. It was wrong of you, it was rude of you, how dare you? They get up and they leave.
Honestly, really, honestly?
Why
really,
can't I
that is
ask
just
these
honestly.
questions? When someone walks out, I feel like I failed. When someone walks out, I don't think that means I've done a great job.
I think it is disgraceful.
Well, I think that it is disgraceful that a public organisation...
Deliberate death. What does that mean? They have me on camera and they're keeping it going. So what people are saying about 60 Minutes is correct.
Yeah. It's going to take 5 minutes.
Sorry?
Right. Pastor, where are you going? I'm asking you a question about your brand of Christianity.
I don't like your terminology. I don't like how you're asking me the question.
I didn't make this
I
up.
need a cigarette.
Thank you for your time. One of the hardest aspects of working on 60 Minutes, especially when I first started, was that expectation that you were front and centre of the story often, and it's not easy.
Touch the people who made the Great Pyramid.
It's because I grew up in kind of ABC, BBC style.
Believe me, this is the only way to cover royalty from the inside.
Where you were an observer, an impartial observer, you did not get in the way of the story. You didn't stand in the way of the scenery, you didn't stand between the story and the camera. In 60 Minutes, you were required to do that.
I feel sometimes with your stories that you can't see the story for the reporter getting in the way. There's George getting out of Jaguars and Ray leaping out of helicopters and Ian wrestling with crocodiles. I mean, who cares?
Let me tell you, Michael, that's a very important thing when you're talking about trying to make people aware, a big Australian audience aware of lots of things that are happening in the world. Because maybe they're not so interested in what's happening in the Korean economy, but they might be interested in what Ian Leslie has to say about it.
The trick is to do it without looking like some kind of grandstanding bastard. I think I got away with it. I don't know.
Freedom!
It does go against the grain for journalists often to become the star in their story. I mean, and I'm not a star, I'm a reporter.
Well, we won't lead on this section.
At the very most, I'm not a star, but a lesser moon.
It might not always seem like it, but the last thing you want to be is the story. Sometimes that happens, and, you know, a very obvious and recent example of that is Beirut, of course.
An Australian 60 Minutes crew has been arrested and charged with kidnapping in Lebanon for their involvement in a botched child recovery operation.
The ambition is never to be the story.
Should we have done it? In retrospect, you wouldn't have wanted to because everybody went through such a torrid time.
These were our friends and our family. These were people we love, and it was terrible. It was deeply shattering.
That was the worst day of my career at 60 Minutes, or career as a journalist, was hearing that 4 of my dear friends and colleagues were in jail, and I think it shocked all of us because it could have been any one of us.
No formal charges have been laid, however, charges have been recommended and a judge has been appointed to investigate the allegations.
And certainly with Beirut, the ambition was to tell someone else's story. And I think the story that we went there to do has become overshadowed by the interest in what happened to the crew of 60 Minutes. Well, I still haven't seen those front pages. There is a great sense of sorrow when you realise what a splash you've made, and for all the wrong reasons, really. And but the greater sorrow and the greater tragedy is that there is a story, a really very sad story, a pressing story still behind that.
We did a story in Spain which was about recovering a baby boy who'd been taken from Tasmania from his mum and taken to Spain with his dad had taken him to Spain.
You've read about this kind of case before. There's a marriage breakup. One parent takes the child in defiance of a court order and runs away overseas.
Now, if that's not a story, I don't want a story.
So this is it, case number 15, to track down a 20-month-old baby boy by the name of Gaudi Rubio.
And so I didn't have any qualms morally or ethically about going there. We had the courts on our side. The baby had been stolen, had been taken illegally out of Australia.
I just ran into the crowd of people. I was shaking all over. I was just petrified.
I ended up in the car driving with the mother and the crying baby as we sped across from one side of Spain to the other side to Madrid, and we got out. What happened in Beirut, the way it was done is debatable, but I think, was it a story to cover babies who'd been stolen from Australia? Yes, I think so. But the idea of journalists sort of turning on journalists for what is a legitimate story appalled me. I think the newspaper coverage was cheap and nasty, and I think that we should have been all working as journalists to try and get them out of there.
It seemed to me that the program had lost some of the fear that should come naturally to anybody when they go into dangerous areas. They were convinced that if it was a story worthwhile, then it was worth taking a risk for, and I don't believe in that.
There is definitely still a story to be told in Beirut, and you still want to tell it, despite what happened, and despite various judgments around it. The core of what that was about is yet to be told, and it's a story, that is repeated over and over again, potentially every week in Australia.
We do court controversy or controversy. There's a controversy or a controversy for you, and we do court it. Oh, yeah, I've got it wrong a few times. I remember getting caught up in a terrible furore over interviewing Bob and Blanche after their love affair became prominent.
I will be accused of pussyfooting around it if I don't say that what most people want to know is, when did the sex begin?
I would never have wanted to ask, when did the sex begin? I had a terrier of a producer, a female producer, and a very good journalist, and she wanted to know. And she said, look, this isn't the ABC, and we're here to sell Toyotas. And you've got to ask this question. That's what every woman wants to know. When did the sex begin?
Before or after you left Hazel?
Well, you'll have to put up with being accused of pussyfooting.
Because you won't tell us?
Certainly not.
Recently, when I re-interviewed them, and it was a charming couple of days.
Bob and Blanche interview? Take one.
I did ask then, not when did the sex begin, but when did the sex finish? And Hawkeye said, never.
Why not?
As he does.
Coming up, looking forward.
60 Minutes just has to retain its sense of self. It has to know what it is.
40 more years of 60 Minutes.
We're the ultimate reality TV. We are telling real stories.
That's next on 60 Minutes.
Well, let me ask you face to face what every Australian would ask you. Did you kill Azaria?
No way. I love that little girl.
Gerald Steinfort was the best boss I ever had in my 50-year career.
Gerald was quite a boss because he did have such a strong image of what the show should be in his head. You did have a sense that if you made a story for Gerald, it would be the best possible story for the country. Oh, he'd love that, wouldn't he? Love me saying that.
I think you could say that a story was not a 60 Minutes story unless people would talk about it the next day, and if they hadn't seen 60 Minutes, they wished they had.
I said to Gerald, what are we trying to prove here? He said, we're trying to give people something to talk about around the water cooler or at the morning tea break.
I can show you television programs over the years that fail because audiences are treated like they're dopes. And they're fed porridge, and audiences spit it out.
Oil was the economic lifeblood of Kuwait, and the country's now losing it at the rate of $120 million a day.
The audience is what matters. I mean, I think what a lot of journalists forget, and television people forget, is that it's not about us. No audience, no program, no pay packet, no experience, no world travel, folks, And if they don't want to watch it, find yourself another job.
Various allegations that you have to make. Dr. Lindsay ran Ward 10B as his own grand psychiatric vision for 13 years. We will leave.
You know, programs that don't work usually don't deserve to work. 60 Minutes has worked for 40 years because it's a really good program.
George, are you gay?
Oh, Lordy!
Yeah, you're my therapist, Pete.
There is no doubt that the 60-minute years were the most fulfilling, the most enjoyable, and the most wonderful years of my working life.
Guten Tag. My name is Mr. Leslie. I am from Australian television.
60 Minutes is one of those once-in-a-lifetime opportunities. I can't believe the success that I've enjoyed, and people still come up to me on the street sometimes and say, "Didn't you used to be Gerald Stone?" I say, "Yes, I used to be."
It's certainly easy to see.
To me, it was never a program. It was a way of getting into people's heads. And people still say to me, "How's 60 Minutes going, George?" I said, "What? That was a little while back. That was my little brother that you were watching, not me."
There will always be a place, I think, for a program like 60 Minutes. 60 Minutes just has to retain its sense of self. It has to know what it is.
I've been at 60 Minutes for 2 or 3 years now, so I clearly have some level of addiction. I love it. It is a dream when you think about it, because not many people have that privilege. And mark my words,
I don't want my death to be in vain.
This is an absolute privilege to do this job, and I'd never, ever, ever lose sight of that.
The whole point of doing the stories that we do is that we have an impact. And sometimes it might make people feel uncomfortable. Sometimes they might hate us. Do you think Kelly murdered her baby?
No,
because she left her stressed and traumatised.
Excuse me.
The best part of all is that that's the summit right there. Hopefully it's opened their eyes to something. It's given them a new perspective. Whatever it is, as long as it makes them feel something.
Has it got another 40 years in it? Are there still stories left to be told? Absolutely.
Why would you
making a big show?
People have been telling stories since Jesus was drinking in the back bar in Jerusalem. I mean, there'll always be room for a good story.
What, you just make up stories about killing people with axes, do you?
It's a great place to work. Hopefully it's a great show to watch. So I think that there's quite a lot of goodwill towards 60 Minutes still being here in 40 years' time.
It's the most incredible feeling of unrestricted freedom. Extraordinary.
60 Minutes gave more to me than it took. I think I've seen so much wonderful stuff, experienced so much.
And we're the ultimate reality TV. We are telling real stories. Reality TV is what it is king, and I reckon that's us.
There you go. Tick, tick, tick.
Hello, I'm Liz Hayes. Thanks for watching. To keep up with the latest from 60 Minutes Australia, make sure you subscribe to our channel. You can also download the 9 Now app for full episodes and other exclusive 60 Minutes content.